I'm Vaughn Crandall. I'm the Executive Director of the California Partnership for Safe Communities. We work in a number of cities in California and nationally to help them reduce violence, also reducing victimization and recidivism for people at highest risk of violence and building police community trust. And I've been working on violence prevention and justice system reform efforts in American cities for over 20 years. One of the most pressing challenges that we face in American society in terms of our criminal justice system has to do with the significant increases in violence in American cities after the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the increase, at least the perception of increase of disorder in many cities also following the COVID pandemic. Many American cities have experienced reductions in serious crime in the last couple of years following the dramatic nationwide spike, but in some cities, levels of violence and disorder remain persistently high. And the challenge that confronts us is, how do we take on serious violence, but also disorder issues in American cities in a way that isn't overly punitive, right? Is creative and problem-oriented, but also produces results and visibly makes a difference in communities that are impacted by serious crime and in a way that is sustainable. So one particularly meaningful memory for me is the work that I and my organization did with a number of partners in Oakland, California, working over almost a decade. Starting in 2011, we helped the city take on a public crisis in terms of community violence, design and implement a strategy to reduce violence at the city level that would also be better for young men who were impacted by violence and help to build trust between police and community. Over the next 8 years, we helped reduce fatal and non-fatal shootings in the city of Oakland by over 50%. We were able to do that while reducing the arrest rate and the victimization rate for young men that were supported through our intervention process. And the Oakland Police Department was making 60% fewer arrests during this period of time than in the prior decade. So that work was incredibly meaningful. It was also evaluated by Northeastern University and found to be that strategy, the Oakland Ceasefire strategy, to be the primary driver of those reductions. And there's one particular moment that I will remember in the earlier days of getting this strategy going, which was at a meeting of African-American pastors in Oakland. And the question at hand fundamentally was whether faith leaders who were working on behalf of impacted communities could trust the city to do the right thing and could be seen as partnering with the Oakland Police Department. And after very intense discussions, a young man shared his experience who was at the meeting, who had himself been shot recently. And there was essentially a moment where the sort of critical mass of pastors just said, we have to try, right? In spite of all the bad history, in spite of all the reasons we have to be skeptical of government, to turn our backs on the police, the lives of, this young man and the sons of this community just matter too much. And so we have to do something. And they spontaneously arose and came together and prayed on this young man in the moment. And it was incredibly moving. Many people were crying, including myself. And it really was a turning point for the beginning of that work in Oakland, where people said, we're gonna try to work together in a way that we hadn't before. So one thing that people might not know about me is that my first job on this pathway is actually working as a paralegal in a public defender's office in Athens, Ohio, which is a very poor, small city in the foothills of the Appalachia, where I went to college. I worked for a public defender, Beth Kaufman, shout out Beth, wherever you are, who handled over 1,200 misdemeanor cases a year as an individual attorney. And it taught me that, I began to learn about the immense challenges of indigent defense through that experience. One of the things I'm most proud of in my career is the opportunity to work in a really deep and long-term way with a number of cities that have had serious violence problems. and helping them make meaningful progress. So I spent almost a decade working in the California cities of Oakland and Stockton, helping both those cities build and implement strategies to reduce violence at a community level, with both subsequently made very, very meaningful progress on those issues. And I was also had the opportunity to work in Mexico City over the last 5 years in partnership with Professor Rodrigo Canales, and really had a really meaningful experience there adapting some of the violence reduction approaches that have worked in the US to the Mexican context. So those are things that have been really meaningful to me, and I feel proud of.